I am 80 years old, and just a year ago I found myself in a situation I never imagined. It was my grandson's birthday. The house was full of balloons, the smell of cake, and the sound of children laughing. In the middle of all that joy, he came to me, gift in hand, and asked if I could help him open it. I looked straight into his eyes, and to my horror, I couldn't remember his name. At that moment, I felt something break inside me. My chest was heavy with shame, sadness, and fear. When I glanced at my daughter, her worried expression confirmed what I already knew. My memory was slipping away. That was the first time I admitted to myself that something was deeply wrong. It wasn't just misplacing my keys or forgetting the day of the week. It was far more serious. I got lost walking home from the supermarket. I couldn't recall conversations I'd had just hours earlier. I even left the stove on for an entire afternoon. Slowly, I felt pieces of my life being erased. I tried everything I could think of: pills, mental exercice, old remedies passed down from friends. Nothing made a difference. Each day, the fog in my mind grew thicker. I began to wonder if I was destined to live the rest of my years fading away. And then, something unexpected happened. Change came not from a new prescription or a complicated treatment, but from a simple daily habit involving an oil many people no longer use or even remember. This oil, once valued for strengthening both body and mind, had almost disappeared from modern life, just as my memories seemed to be slipping away from me. Today, I will share exactly what that oil is, how I discovered it, and what science reveals about its potential to improve memory, focus, and clarity, especially for older adults like us. So stay with me until the end. What you hear today might help more than you realize. And before we begin, I'd love to know, how old are you? And where are you watching from? Please share in the comments below. My quiet battle with memory loss began so subtly that at first I brushed it aside. The slips were small, so ordinary that I convinced myself they meant nothing. I would walk into a room only to stand there, unable to remember why I had gone in. I would open the refrigerator and stare at its shelves, not knowing what I was searching for. Some mornings I woke up struggling to recall the day of the week or what I had planned to do. Soon, even words, simple, everyday words, betrayed me. I remember trying to say chair and instead stumbling out, "That thing you sit on." My grandchildren looked at me kindly, but I could see the worry behind their smiles. I laughed it off, made a joke, but inside I felt a growing fear that something much worse was coming. One afternoon stands out in my memory. I left the same supermarket I had visited countless times. But when I stepped onto the street, everything felt unfamiliar. The stores, the street signs, even the buildings seemed strange. My throat tightened, my heart raced, and I stood frozen until, after several agonizing minutes, the way home returned to me. When I finally arrived, pale and shaken, my daughter could see the truth in my eyes. I tried to minimize what had happened, but she hugged me tightly and whispered, "Dad, we need to face this. It isn't normal." From that day forward, my family became more protective. My oldest grandson offered to handle my finances. My daughter joined me on shopping trips. My son-in-law double-checked appliances whenever he visited. Their care comforted me. Yet it stung. I felt like a child, stripped of independence and trust. Leaving the house frightened me. Cooking, once my joy, became a danger after I nearly caused a fire. Conversations faltered. I forgot words, repeated stories, and lost confidence. Piece by piece, my safety, freedom, and self-belief crumbled. I began to accept that this was only the beginning of an inevitable decline. What I didn't realize was that life still had an unexpected turn, waiting, one connected to a forgotten oil that would change everything. After the frightening episode at the supermarket and the look of worry etched on my family's faces, I knew I could no longer deny what was happening. My daughter pressed me gently. "Dad, let's see a doctor just to be sure." With trembling hands and a heavy chest, I agreed and walked into a neurologist's office for the first time in my life. The waiting room was filled with people my age. Some sat with their children, others alone, but nearly all carried the same mixture of fear and uncertainty. When my turn came, the doctor greeted me warmly, yet wasted no time. He asked about my age, my daily habits, my family's history. Then came the tests. He asked me to remember 3 words: apple, shea, clock. At first, I smiled, thinking it would be easy. Minutes later, when he asked me to recall them, my mind was completely blank. Not one word came back. Next, he asked me to draw a clock and set a specific time. My hands shook as I drew the circle. But when I tried to add the numbers, everything fell apart. More questions followed: what day it was, the city we were in, who the current president was. Some I managed, others I missed. At the end, the doctor looked serious but calm. His conclusion: mild cognitive impairment, not Alzheimer's. He explained, but something that could progress if ignored. He prescribed supplements, medication, and advised me to keep my mind and body active. I followed his instructions faithfully, yet the lapses continued. The worst part was not the confusion itself, but the constant fear of one day not knowing my own home or the people I love. Outwardly, I smiled. Inside, I was slowly surrendering. After leaving the doctor's office, I promised myself I would try everything within my reach. I didn't want my family to watch me slip away little by little, nor did I want to become a burden. So I began with the basics. The doctor had suggested changes in diet: more fresh fruit and vegetables, less sugar, fewer processed meals. I read that berries could boost memory, so every morning I forced down a handful of blueberries. I added salmon to my weekly menu for its omega-3. Even though I never enjoyed its taste, soon my table was covered with bottles of supplements, capsules of omega-3, ginkgo, ginseng, and phosphatidylserine. Each morning felt less like breakfast and more like visiting a pharmacy. Pill after pill, I hoped something would finally work. I also followed advice to train my mind: Sudoku, crosswords, word searches, even downloaded memory apps. At first, these activities gave me the illusion that I was fighting back, but as weeks turned into months, the truth became clear. The lapses remained. I still walked into the kitchen and forgot why. I still repeated stories without realizing. I still misplaced my glasses, keys, and remote. Each day felt like a small battle. But each night I lay in bed feeling I was losing ground. I remember sitting at the table staring at all the bottles, asking myself if any of it truly mattered. My hands trembled, my stomach tightened, and sadness washed over me. Maybe this was the start of the end. Some nights I stood before the mirror, barely recognizing the man staring back. It was a quiet afternoon, one of those days when time feels heavy and thoughts circle endlessly without resolution. I sat on my usual bench in the neighborhood park, watching children laugh and listening to birdsong in the distance. That was when I unexpectedly met an old neighbor, Robert, whom I had not seen in months. What struck me immediately was how well he looked. At 82, the same age as me, his steps were steady, his conversation lively, and his memory sharp. We exchanged stories about the past, reminisced about friends who were gone, and reflected on how fragile life becomes at our age. Almost without intending to, I admitted my struggles. I told him about my memory lapses, the disappointing doctor visits, the endless bottles of pills, and the fear that greeted me every morning. Robert listened quietly, with the patience that only age brings, then gave me a knowing smile. As if he had walked the same path, leaning closer, he spoke softly, as though revealing a secret. I went through the same thing years ago, but I discovered something that changed everything. Intrigued, I asked what it was. He answered with two simple words: coconut oil. I stared at him, unsure whether to laugh or doubt. Coconut oil, the same product I had once seen in the cooking aisle. Could it really be the answer? Seeing my hesitation, Robert explained how in many tropical cultures, it was treasured not only for skin and hair, but also for the mind. He described its medium-chain triglycerides fats that the brain can easily use for fuel when glucose fails. I remained skeptical, but Robert reassured me, you have nothing to lose, and so much to gain. That night, his words echoed in my head. By morning, I had decided to try. The morning after my conversation with Robert, I walked straight to the local health food shop. On the shelf, I spotted a glass jar labeled in bold letters, extra virgin coconut oil, cold pressed. I picked it up, read the label again and again, and although doubts remained, I bought it. Before tasting a drop, I sat down at my computer. I wanted to understand what made this oil so different and why it might influence memory. What I learned was more fascinating than I expected. Coconut oil is rich in something called medium-chain triglycerides, or MCTs. Put simply, these are fats that the body processes very quickly. Unlike regular fats, MCTs skip the slow digestion process. Instead, they travel directly to the liver, where they are converted into ketones, a powerful source of energy. The brain, especially in younger years, relies mainly on glucose, the sugar in our blood, but with age, the brain becomes less efficient at using glucose, leading to forgetfulness, lack of focus, and mental fog. Ketones, however, can enter brain cells even when glucose fails, restoring energy and helping neurons function more effectively. This isn't just an idea from the internet. Scientific studies, including research published in respected journals, have shown that MCTs may improve memory in older adults with mild impairment. I also read about doctors who documented real-life improvements in patients after adding coconut oil to their diets. Skeptical as I was, these findings and Robert's story sparked a small flame of hope in me. That same afternoon, I finally gathered the courage to open the bottle of coconut oil I had purchased. I poured a single tablespoon into a spoon, looked at it closely, and after a deep breath, swallowed it. The flavor was lighter than I expected, smooth with a faint sweetness. In that small act, without realizing it, I had just taken the first step toward the most profound change I had experienced in years. The next morning, as usual, I woke with the foggy confusion that had become part of my life. I walked to the kitchen, glanced at the bottle on the counter, and once again served myself a spoonful. I wasn't sure about the best time to take it, but after reading that many people used it on an empty stomach, I chose to do it before breakfast, day after day. I kept the habit sometimes straight from the spoon, other times mixed into my morning coffee, stirred into oatmeal, or even used when cooking eggs. It was surprisingly easy to include, and the best part was that I never felt it was a burden. On the contrary, it became something I looked forward to. During the first days, nothing dramatic happened. I still misplaced my glasses, walked into rooms and forgot why, or repeated stories without noticing, but around the second week, something subtle shifted. While speaking on the phone with my daughter, she mentioned a neighbor from years back. Without hesitation, I recalled his name, the dog he owned, and even the cap he always wore. She paused, surprised, and then laughed. "Dad, since when do you remember all that?" We laughed together. But inside, I was astonished. In the following days, more small victories appeared. I needed my shopping list less often. I remembered my grandchildren's names without stumbling, and I could finish conversations without losing track. Then one Sunday, during a family gathering, everyone began reminiscing about a trip we had taken long ago. To everyone's surprise, I joined in with details. They had forgotten the name of the place, the car we drove, even the song we sang. My daughter looked at me wide-eyed, and my son-in-law joked, "It feels like you've regained 10 years of memory." That was the moment I realized these weren't coincidences. My mind truly felt as if it were gradually waking up again. With every improvement, the fear that once haunted me grew weaker. The anxiety faded, and in its place came a calm confidence. I felt more present, more myself, and for the first time in a long while, I allowed myself to hope again. Although coconut oil gave me the spark I needed, I quickly realized it could not work alone. If I truly wanted lasting change, I had to care for my mind and body in other ways too. So, I began to focus on small but meaningful habits, each one adding strength to the improvements. I was starting to feel. The first area I tackled was food. For most of my life, I had eaten without thinking: pastries, sugary snacks, white bread, and plenty of quick processed meals. All of it tasted convenient, but none of it nourished my brain. So I started by cutting back on sugar. It was difficult at first, since I had always added 2 spoonfuls to my coffee and reached for a cookie in the afternoon. But slowly I reduced it until I could drink my coffee black, sometimes with a sprinkle of cinnamon. I also began filling my plate with more vegetables. Where salads once rarely appeared, now spinach, broccoli, carrots, and whatever seasonal produce I had on hand became a regular part of each meal. Not only did my memory thank me, but my whole body seemed more energized. Next came exercising my brain. At first, I resisted because I thought puzzles and word games sounded tedious. But I reminded myself that the brain is like a muscle. It needs activity. I started with crosswords, struggled at first, but improved little by little. Then I returned to reading light books that still required focus. And I challenged myself to learn one new word each week, using it in conversation or jotting it in notes so I wouldn't forget. Another habit that changed everything was socializing. When memory begins to slip, the temptation is to withdraw, to avoid embarrassment. But I pushed myself to talk with neighbors, call old friends, and join family gatherings. Smile. Each exchange felt like exercise for my mind. Physical movement also proved vital. I didn't attempt anything extreme. I simply started walking. At first, it was only to the corner, then around the block, and eventually nearly half an hour a day. The fresh air, sunlight, and circulation cleared my head in a way nothing else could. Finally, I addressed my sleep. I used to stay up late watching television or scrolling my phone. Waking restless and tired, I changed by setting a consistent bedtime, putting devices away an hour before sleep, reading or listening to calming music instead, and sometimes drinking chamomile tea. Gradually, my nights grew deeper, and my mornings clearer. Looking back, it wasn't only the spoonful of oil. It was this collection of daily choices: diet, mental work, social connection, gentle exercise, and quality rest that together rebuilt my clarity. There is no magic cure, Only steady steps, taken day by day. And believe me, those steps are worth it. Before you rush to add coconut oil into your routine, I need to pause and share a few important cautions. This oil has been helpful to me, but it is not something to take lightly or without preparation. First, not all coconut oils are the same. Many of the bottles on supermarket shelves are refined, bleached, or chemically treated, which removes much of their natural goodness. If you want to try it, look for extra virgin coconut oil. Ideally cold-pressed and organic, this type retains the beneficial fats, antioxidants, and nutrients that may support the brain. Always check the label carefully and avoid anything that says refined or contains additives. Second, speak with your doctor before starting. Everybody is different. And while coconut oil can have benefits, it may not be right for everyone. People with high cholesterol or liver conditions especially need medical guidance first. I personally consulted my physician, who ran tests to make sure I could safely begin. That step gave me peace of mind. Third, keep the quantity small. Coconut oil is calorie-dense like any fat. 1 tablespoon a day was enough for me, and some people even begin with half that to let the body adjust. Too much at once may cause digestive issues such as stomach upset. Finally, remember, this is not a miracle cure. Coconut oil works best as part of an overall healthy lifestyle, balanced diet, regular activity, mental exercise, and patience. Taken responsibly, it can become one more step toward clearer memory and better well-being. Today, after walking this long road, I can say with complete honesty that I feel like myself again. At 80 years old, I no longer feel like a prisoner of forgetfulness. I feel like the keeper of my own memories once more. Only a year ago, I lived through days that were frightening and heartbreaking. I would pass by a familiar neighbor and struggle to recall their name. I would freeze mid-sentence, searching desperately for the simplest word. The hardest part wasn't the forgetfulness itself, it was the fear, that quiet, invisible fear that whispered in my ear, "You're fading, piece by piece. You're slipping further away from the person you once were." But today, things are different. Now, I can look back on family birthdays and recall every smile. I can share stories from my youth without hesitation. And most importantly, I've regained a sense of clarity that I thought was lost forever. It wasn't magic. It didn't happen in a single night. And I would never tell you that miracles exist in a bottle. What I can say is that a small, steady change can spark a transformation. For me, it was a single spoonful of natural oil each day, combined with the decision to keep fighting. To refuse to accept that confusion would define the rest of my life. And if I could find my way back, you can too. If you are listening and noticing more slips in memory, or if someone you love is facing the same struggles, take this as a sign. Do not stop searching for ways to protect your mind. Do not stop believing in your ability to improve. Often the answer is closer, simpler, and more attainable than we imagine. Every small effort counts. Every spoonful, every stroll in the sunlight, every lively conversation, every restful night, these are the pieces that fit together to rebuild a stronger, healthier mind. And now, I would truly love to hear from you. Share in the comments. Have you ever tried a natural approach to support your memory? Would you like me to explore other foods, habits, or exercises that can sharpen the mind in future videos? Your words can encourage someone else who feels hopeless, and your feedback inspires me to continue sharing what I've learned. If this story gave you even a bit of hope, if it reassured you that change is still possible, or if it sparked the courage to try something new, please take a moment to subscribe and turn on the notification bell. That way, you won't miss the upcoming videos where I'll continue to share insights, lessons, and experiences that can help you build a brighter, stronger tomorrow. Thank you for staying with me through to the end. I'm sending you a warm embrace, and I look forward to seeing you again very soon in the next video.